The topic of this video is contextual photography. I'm Kim Bridges, and I want to explore contextual photography with you over the next few minutes. I generally take a lot of camera gear into the field. I'm particularly attracted to interesting subjects, and I think that this is quite a natural phenomenon. My photographic objective becomes one of getting visually appealing pictures of subjects that I find in the field. I work hard to get these good photos. I call these art shots. My camera kit has become big and heavy. This is the kind of equipment that is needed to get good art shots. But here's my problem. I believe that by concentrating on these art shots, I'm failing to get the breadth of coverage that I need to fully support research activities. Very specifically, my approach to photography, using a big, heavy camera, hasn't been very good at capturing visual documentation that supports field studies. I want to step back and look at this situation. We take a camera with us when we do our studies for very good reasons. I think that we share a goal of wanting a visual record of all aspects of our study. For example, reviewing our photographs reminds us of many aspects of our study. The photographs also let us more fully share our experiences with other people. Ideally, we should have a dense photographic record of all aspects of our study. This includes pictures of the people with whom we are working. We should also document the events that occur during our study. This can show the process of doing field studies. We should also show the routes that we take to get to our field study areas. This can remind us of the logistical conditions that we encountered. We should take photos of specific places, although if they're really beautiful, we probably don't need a reminder to grab these shots. And finally, we're always attracted to specific features, whether they're plants or people, which are particularly important or photogenic. We don't need to be reminded to take photos of these features. Generally, these are the subjects of our pictures. Now that we've established our general goal for documentation, let me tell you about some of the new cameras that I've been using. I'll also describe the features of these cameras that I've found to be useful. Then we'll look at how these cameras can be used together to provide the breadth of photo coverage that I believe is important for documentation. Finally, I'll mention some of the practicalities of using a bunch of cameras in the field. My examples will be generally drawn from field studies and classes involved in conservation ethnobotany. However, I believe that my experiences are quite general and will apply to many aspects of ethnobotany. All modern digital cameras do more than take photographs. That's why I prefer to call these digital camera platforms. I have found that in spite of their appearance, all of the cameras take pretty good pictures. Let's look at some of these cameras and their characteristics. Smartphones and their integral cameras are likely to be generally familiar to everyone. We've had quite a few generations of this technology, and smartphone photography has become very popular. You can use these cameras for both still and movie photography. The key thing is that there is a lot of software, what we call apps, that enhance the capabilities of the smartphone to take and process images. For example, we can assemble time-lapse sequences. We can combine photos into high dynamic range images, and we can stitch panoramas from many photos. Smartphones also have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi lets a smartphone communicate with other devices that have Wi-Fi. We'll see that this is a very important attribute of these devices. Smartphones often include a vast array of sensors. It is possible to get data on the orientation of the smartphone, whether it is moving, the light environment, and a bunch of other things. GPS technology is generally included in smartphones so that you know not only the exact location, but also the date and precise time. The software in smartphones provides a way to combine sensor data, including GPS locations, with images. This can greatly increase the value of the photos. For example, a set of photos can be shown on a map so that you can see the coverage of an area. Photos can also store the direction the camera was pointing. This can be very helpful when you want to do repeat photography at a site to determine whether there have been changes. The next two cameras are closely related. I call one of them an add-on camera, as it generally can't be used without pairing it with a smartphone. The other is an action camera. This particular camera is similar to the popular GoPro series of cameras. The add-on and the action cameras have all of the optics and electronics to capture both still and video images. What each lacks is a viewfinder. You aim the camera by looking at an image on a smartphone. You also control most of the camera operations by using software on a smartphone. In the case of the add-on camera, you can zoom and focus the camera by touching the screen on the smartphone. You also use that to trigger the shot. Similarly, you can start and stop the action camera by using a smartphone. Wi-Fi is the way that cameras can communicate with smartphones. The distance between the camera and the smartphone may be very short, such as when this add-on camera is hooked to the smartphone. However, Wi-Fi signals can travel up to about 10 meters. This means that a Wi-Fi camera can be located quite some distance away from a smartphone. You can see how this works in an example. The subject for this photograph is a relatively rare plant located in a forest in Hawaii. This is a sensitive area, and you really shouldn't be pushing through the vegetation to get a shot. Instead, you can use a pole to which you've attached an add-on camera. That's the camera out there near the flower that will be photographed. The camera sends the live image back to a smartphone. It is possible to press on the smartphone screen to zoom the camera, set the focus point, and to activate the camera. The result is a good photo. You haven't harmed the vegetation or the environment because you've been able to use this remote camera capability. With Wi-Fi, there is a two-way communication process. The live image preview is being sent from the camera to the smartphone, and the camera operation data, such as the zoom, focus, and triggering, is sent from the smartphone to the camera. In some cases, you can also send smartphone sensor data to the camera. This is useful, for example, when the camera doesn't have a GPS. You can use the smartphone GPS and transmit the location to the camera for storage with the picture. Notice that you don't need to get your eye up to the camera. You just need to look at your smartphone, and that phone can be up to 30 feet away from the camera. This remote operation gives you great flexibility. In particular, you can locate cameras in interesting new places. You've seen that they can go on the end of a pole. They can also fit on a dashboard and help you make a time-lapse video of your journey. The spherical panorama camera is similar to the two cameras that we just looked at. It is small, and it also communicates with Wi-Fi. This camera has a very wide view. It produces what's called a photosphere. This is a full 360-degree view. The Ryko Theta camera has two 180-degree lenses, one on each side of the camera. It takes 2 pictures each time it is triggered. The 2 images are combined with software in the camera to make a full 360-degree panorama. Looking at the flat representation of a photosphere isn't very interesting because of the distortion. Similarly, a projection of the full image on a sphere fails to show the full value of these photosphere images. When you use a special viewer, you can appreciate the value of a photosphere. With the viewer, you can move around in the photosphere. You can look forward, then turn to see what was behind you. You can look to the side, and then complete the circle by returning to the front. You can look up and see what was directly above you. Or you can look down. Here you can see the top of my head as I was holding the Theta camera above my head when I took this picture. There are 2 different kinds of wearable cameras shown here. Both these take a series of still photos using a fairly wide-angle lens. I call these wearable cameras because you clip them onto your clothes or gear. Photos are taken 2 different ways depending on the type of wearable camera. One type of wearable camera uses a timer. Typically, this kind of camera takes a photo every 30 seconds. The narrative clip is this type of camera. The other type of wearable camera has many sensors, including GPS, to record locations. This camera takes a picture when the software determines that the situation has changed. This might be the result of different light conditions, or the movement of the camera, or someone approaching the camera. The OMG autographer is this type of camera. All of the images from a wearable camera, along with some sensor data, are sent to a website that processes the set of photos. The software attempts to simplify the set of photos by organizing sequences and reducing unneeded redundancy. The results can be viewed as a set of photos or a time-lapse movie. Here is a small selection of the automatically taken photos from a hike with an autographer. These photos document a particularly difficult part of the trail. Climbing here requires a lot of attention, and you need to use both hands as you scramble up the steep incline. It would be impractical to use one hand to take photos here. Even worse, it could be quite dangerous. Documenting this section of the trail is important, however, as it shows some of the difficulties that are encountered when doing work in this area. Consider all of the cameras together. They bring a new kind of functionality to the task of documenting our research. Together, these cameras provide the technology for what I call contextual photography. Contextual photography uses many more photographs than we've been using in our research. In general, the new camera technology increases both the number and the diversity of our photos. Most of the photographs added with these new digital cameras have a lower resolution than the kind we get with cameras we use for art shots. But what we are capturing is a completely different view. These cameras are very small and simple to operate. All you do with the autographer wearable camera is to turn it on. It takes pictures by itself. And it's so light that you'll soon forget that you're wearing it. The Theta spherical panorama camera has just one button that is pushed to take a photo. Everything is automatically in focus and properly exposed. These cameras, and the others that I have described here, clearly meet the goal of small and simple to operate while adding a wealth of new kinds of photographic information. Now let's consider how different cameras can be used in a typical day of research. An action cam can be used in a vehicle to get a time-lapse series of photos that document the trip from the base station to the study area. This documents the broadest spatial context. Closer to the study area, photographs can be combined with detailed GPS location records. This can further document the activities and the route. This is a finer scale documentation, both spatially and temporally. Finally, the walk through the study area continues with the documentation of the route with GPS recording, along with periodic still photos. Images along the trail are documented with photospheres. Wearable cameras add valuable images that document the activities. Together, this photographic record provides a very fine scale, temporal and spatial documentation. By using all of the different cameras, you'll find that you've expanded both the spatial and temporal coverage of the documentation. You'll have a much richer photographic record without much additional work. Even though it's easy to use these cameras, it is impractical for one person to try to use them all. Instead, it seems better to develop an overall workflow that assigns cameras to different people. You may need just one person using an action cam for time-lapse photography. Several people could attach wearable cameras to their clothes so that different perspectives can be obtained. A two-person team works well for both the spherical and add-on cameras. One person can hold the camera while the other one uses a smartphone to focus and trigger the camera. Digital images are easy to share. It is more likely that people will accept having different roles in the documentation process if the aggregation of the images is clearly laid out. Prompt sharing of all the photos is important. The goal of this presentation has been to get you thinking about the many new facets of digital photography platforms. How would you use these cameras? How would these cameras help you document your research? How can the photos benefit you in archiving and communicating your research results? Most of the digital cameras that I have been discussing are quite new. As a result, we are only beginning to explore how these cameras can be used. The designs will change, of course. Some designs may not survive. And you can expect to see additions to the set of interesting digital cameras. We can already see some changes. For example, the Ricoh Theta spherical panorama camera has a 5 megapixel resolution. This seems barely enough for most of our uses. About 6 months after the Theta was released, we expect to see the Bubble Cam. It will have a 14 megapixel resolution. That will give us much better details. And the Bubble Cam adds video capabilities. You will have noticed that some of these cameras are small enough to be used for stealth photography. Above all else, make sure that you make ethical use of this technology.